The Arctic peoples whose lives are being reflected in films here at the Berlinale carry different passports and speak different languages, but something they share is a concern about the impact that the rest of the world is having on their traditional way of life.
It's based around an elder in the Chukchi community of reindeer herders. He's trying to make sure his grandchildren's generation gets to learn about their native culture.
This tribe in the Arctic has shocked researchers for decades with its undaunted spirit and remarkable skills in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Surrounded by frigid temperatures and near constant darkness in winter, they thrive through centuries-old knowledge passed down across generations. Despite shifting climates and external pressures, they hold on to a worldview that respects every element of nature, ensuring their traditions remain vibrant and deeply rooted in ancestral wisdom. The Yupik. The Yupik people inhabit some of the harshest regions in Alaska and the Russian Far East, surviving in environments that would be unlivable for most. For centuries, they have drawn upon resourcefulness, communal knowledge, and a deep spiritual connection to the land and sea to endure the Arctic's extremes.
It's home to roughly 130,000 Native Americans inhabiting some 200 centuries-old villages, people widely considered the human barometers for how troubling climate change has become.
Central to Yupik life is the belief that every aspect of nature is alive with spirit. From the towering mountains to the smallest fish in the sea, each entity has its own essence, deserving of reverence. This animistic worldview shapes interpersonal relationships, daily chores, and larger community decisions. Encouraging harmony with the environment, their spiritual guides, called shamans, assume a profound role, healing the sick, interpreting signs from the spirit world, and bridging the gap between visible and invisible realms. A pivotal concept in Yupik cosmology is Elam Yua, sometimes understood as the spirit of the universe, the unseen force believed to have given life to everything. Yupik cultural expression flourishes in wood and ivory carvings. Elaborate masks and sculptures do more than serve as decorative pieces. Each carving contains a narrative or memory from the group's collective history. During ceremonies, especially potlatch gatherings, these masks come to life as dancers don them to connect with ancestral spirits. These dances include hypnotic drumming, chanting, and movements that both preserve tradition and pass on intangible wisdom to younger generations. Surviving Arctic winters necessitates creativity and skill. The Yupik excel at constructing shelters like the Kashim underground communal houses, designed to mitigate the region's brutal cold. Lined with animal skins, these dwellings retain heat more efficiently than structures above ground. The Yupik also build ena, smaller, snug shelters crafted from the best local materials to fit immediate family units. In addition to housing, hunting constitutes a cornerstone of Yupik survival. Armed with harpoons and spears, they pursue seals, walrus, and caribou. Their kayaks, lightweight and nimble, allow them to navigate frigid waters in pursuit of marine mammals, a true testament to engineering adapted for Arctic conditions. The Nenets. The Nenets reside primarily in the Siberian tundra, part of the vast Arctic region of Russia. For centuries, they have adapted brilliantly to one of the coldest places on Earth, relying on deep knowledge of reindeer, snow, and ice to build a sustainable lifestyle. A defining feature of Nenets culture is the intricate vocabulary describing the various types of snow. This nuanced language, encompassing terms for everything from fresh powder to icy crust, helps them assess terrain, determine the safest migratory paths, and protect their herds. This skill proves indispensable as climate change causes the tundra's conditions to fluctuate more rapidly, making traditional migrations increasingly precarious. Reindeer are fundamental to the Nenets in nearly every aspect of life. Food, transportation, clothing, and even tents originate from these essential animals.
This is a community of 60 people living in 9 chums. On the days between migrations, they spend most of their time looking after reindeer and making repairs.
The traditional Nenets dwelling, the chum, is a cone-shaped structure fashioned from wooden poles covered with reindeer hides. In winter, when temperatures plummet to -50 degrees Celsius, these hides provide extraordinary insulation, allowing entire families to remain warm. Equally vital is the ability to set up and dismantle chums quickly, reflecting a nomadic culture that moves seasonally with the herds. Family forms the core of Nenets society, with migration decisions, herd management, and child rearing all approached communally. The Nenets trace lineage through the father's line, and each clan occupies specific territories passed down through generations. Within these clans, elders wield influence backed by a lifetime of knowledge, but the community's spiritual heart often lies in the role of tadia, or shamans. These spiritual figureheads ensure harmony between humans and the tundra's manifold spirits, guiding the tribe in negotiations with the unseen forces believed to govern environmental balance. The Aleut. Though often referred to interchangeably, the term Aleut covers diverse groups, including the Unangaks, people from the Aleutian Islands, and the Sugpiaq, from Koryak Island. Over centuries, the Aleut faced dramatic external pressures, from Russian colonization to American military campaigns, that reshaped their identity. When Russian fur traders arrived in 1741, they initially conducted trade with the local people. However, the outsiders rapidly overhunted sea otters and seals, leading to ecological disruptions that had dire repercussions for the Aleut. Diseases brought by Europeans decimated local populations, and violent skirmishes further destabilized everyday life. Once numbering around 25,000, the Aleut population plummeted to roughly 2,000 by the late 19th century, ripped apart by conflict, epidemics, and enslavement. Their language, Unangam Tunu, which once bound a thriving community, now flirts with the threat of extinction, having only a small handful of fluent speakers alive. Historically, Aleut spiritual beliefs melded animism and shamanism with an acute recognition of the spirits infusing the sea, wind, and land. As Russian Orthodox missionaries took root in their territories, many Aleut converted to Christianity. Rather than replacing one system with another, they often amalgamated them, continuing to venerate ancestral spirits while attending church.
So the Russian Orthodox Church, I was actually fortunate enough to go into one of the churches, and on preparation day, we were allowed to go into one and just, see what it was like, see the different things that they do and their version of, Mass, you could say.
The result is a living tapestry that combines both ancient cosmology and Eastern Orthodox practices. Beyond Russian colonization, World War II brought a new layer of trauma. American authorities forcibly relocated many Aleut communities to internment camps under dire living conditions. Families were torn from their homes, sometimes only briefly, other times for years. Not until decades later would the Aleut receive official apologies and financial compensation for this devastating chapter in their history. The Koryaks. The Koryaks, living in the Kamchatka region of Russia, maintain a deep spiritual relationship with their environment, particularly reindeer. Throughout history, they have relied on close-knit family structures, seasonal migrations, and communal decision-making to endure the region's cold and shifting landscapes. For the Koryaks, every element of nature embodies power. Shamans, typically chosen through ancestral lineage or spiritual visions, act as mediators with these forces. Drumming, dancing, and ritual chanting allow them to maintain a sense of cosmic equilibrium, a link vital to daily survival. Like the Nenets, Koryaks derive much of their sustenance from reindeer. The animals supply meat, hides for clothing, and a means of travel. The communal butchering of a reindeer is accompanied by prayers of gratitude, ensuring respect for the creature's spirit. This reciprocal approach to nature and animals fosters a shared responsibility for maintaining local ecosystems. In the Soviet era, external authorities imposed policies that sought to modernize or Russify indigenous lifestyles. Koryaks were encouraged or compelled to abandon ancestral nomadism to settle in permanent villages. Over time, forced education in Russian overshadowed the Koryak language, straining generational transmission of knowledge. In 2007, the Koryak Autonomous Okrug was merged with Kamchatka Krai, removing a layer of political autonomy. The Gwich'in. Situated across parts of Alaska and northwestern Canada, the Gwich'in people exemplify a profound unity with the Vadzai caribou. This bond transcends mere subsistence, reaching into their core identity and spiritual beliefs. The porcupine caribou herd is central to Gwich'in cosmology. Hunting practices revolve around ethical principles that safeguard herd vitality for generations yet unborn. Caribou flesh, hides, bones, and sinew have long been essential for food, clothing, domino-like gaming pieces, and tool-making. In Gwich'in storytelling, caribou and humans were once inseparable, forging a pledge to protect each other. Modern threats arise in the form of resource extraction, notably oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The Gwich'in have launched formidable advocacy campaigns to prevent the disruption of calving grounds vital to the herd's survival.
Leaders, youth, and elders from across Gwich'in Nation are in Washington, D.C., a push to restore protections for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Located in northeast Alaska, the refuge's coastal plain serves as the birthing grounds for porcupine caribou and is considered sacred to Gwich'in peoples in northern Canada and Alaska.
Their activism underscores the continuity between spiritual tradition and public policy, as the Gwich'in stand resolute against jeopardizing a sacred relationship that undergirds every aspect of their culture. The Gwich'in language retains nuances that convey practical knowledge about weather patterns, hunting practices, and clan relationships. Rather than being a static cultural artifact, it merges an ancient worldview with modern activism. Community elders pass down the language in special gatherings, bridging past and present. Leaders like Sarah James have gained international attention for advocating the protection of caribou habitats, epitomizing the synergy between spiritual guardianship and political engagement. The Evens and the Evenks. Though sometimes written about together, the Evens and the Evenks are distinct groups that trace their lineage back to ancient Tungusic-speaking peoples. Both have migrated through Siberia over millennia, engaging in reindeer herding, fishing, and a way of life yoked to nomadism. Originally, these tribes occupied territories near Lake Baikal, along the Amur River, and extending toward the Sea of Okhotsk. As Russian explorers arrived in the 17th century, they demanded tribute in the form of furs, the yasak. This forced the Evens and the Evenks to move deeper into remote territories. The harshness of the region, combined with cultural adaptability, helped them preserve essential traditions. Reindeer are crucial to both groups for transport, meat, hides, and even fish skin clothing among certain communities. Mobile conical tents, similar to the chum or teepee, constructed from birch bark and reindeer hides, allowed them to follow herds across vast, windswept plains and mountainous regions. Fishing supplemented their diet and trade. In some cases, fish skins were dried, treated, and then used to sew garments strong enough to protect them from the elements. The Yukagir. Hailing from northeastern Siberia, the Yukagir consider their environment to be animated by countless spirits, from the trees and animals to the sun overhead. Their creation myths revolve around a supreme sun deity named Pugu, perceived as a moral judge and caretaker of cosmic balance. Blending shamanism and animism, the Yukagir regard shamans, or Alma, as pivotal figures. These individuals heal the sick, protect the community from malevolent spirits, and interpret significant dreams. Their legacies do not end with death. The remains of shamans are preserved as sacred relics, allowing their power to guide the tribe even after physical life ceases. Meticulous rituals define Yukagir approaches to hunting. Animals like elk and reindeer are considered to have powerful guardian spirits. Disrespecting these spirits could spell bad fortune for the entire community. As such, hunts involve offerings, prayers, or the careful placement of bones so as not to offend the creature's soul. Friendships forged through these shared, deeply respectful practices strengthen communal bonds. Despite lacking metal tools until the early 20th century, the Yukagir have long been resilient innovators. They crafted sturdy winter homes using bark, wood, and furs. Summertime lent itself to lighter, portable dwellings. Likewise, canoes aided fishing, while skillful tracking allowed them to find game in shifting tundra environments. The Inuit. The Inuit are renowned worldwide for their expertise in surviving along the Arctic coasts of northern Canada, Alaska, and Greenland.
To connect with Inuit in Greenland, Nunavik, Nunavut, and the Aleut regions. As a hunter or as a carver, we try to share stories, we try to share what we're harvesting, methods and means, what's available.
Historically nomadic, they developed ingenious methods for navigating a frigid environment with limited flora and fauna. Walrus, seal, and whale hunts, carried out with harpoons, remain culturally central to many Inuit communities. On land, caribou hunts employ bows and arrows or rifles in modern times. Kayaks and larger umiaks, crafted from animal skins over a frame, allow hunters to travel across icy waters in near silence. Clothing from caribou or seal hides provides natural insulation, a necessity in sub-zero temperatures. Igloos, built from blocks of packed snow, are a testament to their architectural wisdom, retaining heat surprising well. The Inuit place strong emphasis on group cohesion. Families rotate responsibilities, from preserving meat and fish to sewing and child-rearing. Elders play an instructive role, guiding the younger generation in values like cooperation and respect for nature.
So the Inuit are one of many groups of First Nations, and First Nations mean Native Americans, who live in very, very cold places.
While modernization has introduced novel challenges, Inuit languages, collectively known as Inuktitut, among other dialects, remain beacons of cultural continuity, encoding knowledge about ice conditions, geographic names, and navigation gleaned from millennia of experience. Shifts from nomadism to settlement living have impacted Inuit food systems, leading to reliance on store-bought goods. These, in turn, can be prohibitively expensive and less healthy than traditional diets. Climate change also disrupts sea ice cycles, making hunting routes more dangerous. The Khanty and the Mansi. Often cited together due to linguistic and cultural similarities, the Khanty and the Mansi live in western Siberia, along river systems that feed into the Ob. Both groups hold the bear in extraordinary reverence, viewing it as an ancestor, a guide, and in some mythologies, the offspring of their supreme deity, Tom. A critical rite is the respectful treatment of any bear taken during the hunt. The bear's hide may be adorned with ribbons, and the community engages in elaborate songs, dances, and feasting to placate the animal's spirit. Far from being a mere spectacle, such ceremonies represent the tribe's moral confrontation with taking another life and reaffirm their connection to the broader tapestry of flora and fauna. Both Khanty and Mansi organize themselves into clans passed down through the male line, shaping patterns of marriage, settlement, and ritual life. Within each clan territory, smaller family groups hunt, fish, and gather in seasonal rotations governed by time-honored knowledge of local resources. Tightly knit social bonds help buffer them against the region's extremes. As Soviet influence spread, attempts were made to assimilate the Khanty and Mansi into Russian mainstream society. Traditional practices were discouraged, religious ceremonies suppressed, and children often sent away to boarding schools where Russian replaced indigenous languages. The creation of the Khanty Mansi Autonomous Okrug has helped restore a measure of self-determination, but these tribes continue to grapple with industrial development on their lands, especially oil extraction. The Sami. Stretching across northern Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia's Kola Peninsula, the Sami are a diverse indigenous group.
Government is accused of failing to properly deal with a climate crisis that threatens the Sami way of life.
Much of the wealth that Sweden has built on is built on Sami ground.
With an ancestry that may date back 10,000 years or more, soon after the last ice age receded. Their distinct reindeer herding traditions, vibrant textiles, and hauntingly beautiful musical expression, called Yupik, have captured global intrigue. The Sami likely originated from Paleolithic-era migrations that ventured northward in pursuit of animals like reindeer and fish. Over centuries, they developed a semi-nomadic lifestyle, closely following reindeer herds across the mountainous or tundra-like expanses, a practice that continues to form the economic backbone of many Sami communities. Reindeer are fundamental to the Sami way of life, providing meat, hides for clothing, and a cultural identity that revolves around the cyclical rhythms of herd migration. Skilled herders use their understanding of terrain, vegetation, and weather to guide animals to optimal grazing grounds. They adopt modern tools, like snowmobiles, alongside more traditional methods, striking a unique balance between heritage and innovation. National laws in Norway and Sweden offer special protective status to Sami reindeer husbandry, symbolizing emerging acknowledgement of these ancient rites. Historically, the Sami practiced animism, venerating spirits believed to dwell in rocks, lakes, and trees. Sacrificial sites, called siedi, dotted landscapes to honor these nature spirits. With the spread of Christianity, many Sami adopted new religious practices, yet older beliefs frequently blended with Christian motifs. Today, some Sami remain devoutly Christian, while others incorporate elements of animism in personal or community ceremonies. Similarly, Yupik songs, often dedicated to specific people, animals, or territories, provide spiritual continuity that transcends purely religious categories. The Sami speak multiple dialects of the Sami language, recognized officially in parts of Finland, Norway, and Sweden. Colorful clothing, known as the gakti, typically features geometric patterns and symbolism reflecting one's home region. Sami artisans produce intricate woven sashes, carved duaji, and silver jewelry that echo centuries-old motifs.
Hear the sediment here.
It continues under the sediment, so It means that the sediment accumulated after the structure was built.
Right.
Based on this sediment accumulated above the base, we assume that it was built about 4,000 years ago minimum, or perhaps even earlier.
Which inadvertently meant they were in the right historical neighborhood. With this, they knew they were at the right spot, so they examined further, only to be shocked by what they saw. The 3D image revealed an unnatural, constructed formation on the otherwise flat lake floor. Surprised, one of the expedition team members acknowledged they were not natural formations, as it looked like a structure that someone or a group of people who transported these basalt stones from its original site deliberately erected. This struck a chord in Josh, so turning to one of the archaeologists, he said the structure reminded him of a cairn, an artificial stone mound covering a tomb underneath. And so, he asked if it was possible that there was something buried inside, and to his utter shock, the scientist agreed, even stating that it was the only untouched tomb of this kind in that entire region. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Has Moses' tomb been found? At this point, the dots started connecting, and while mused that the structure was not a magic rock, Josh was hopeful that it could still be connected to the story of Exodus. To further emphasize what he felt, Josh pointed at how this structure could turn out to be Miriam's well that may have been covered by water years after its disappearance. This was definitely a possibility worth exploring further. So clearly excited by the implications, Josh said the next step would be to investigate exactly what lies inside, as he suspected it could be the untouched tomb of an ancient figure, possibly Moses, which would be a groundbreaking discovery. Josh noted there was still much work to be done, but this was just the right stroke in the right direction of unraveling this age-long mystery. But was Josh able to find this mystery tomb? Let's find out in the next chapter. Moses' tomb, found. To find the exact location of this burial place, which has rendered archaeologists restless for centuries, experts had to fall back to accounts in the holy texts to see if they could find clues or match any of these biblical sites to their modern location. Using the biblical account, these experts made no headway because though the book of Deuteronomy stated that he was laid to rest in a valley across from Beth Peor, exploration of the area had shown no signs of his grave. Having met a dead end from the biblical perspective, these experts turned to Islamic tradition. Perhaps they could find a clue from their holy texts or the sayings of Prophet Muhammad. Was this approach successful? Let's find out. The significance of Moses, or Musa as he is known in Islamic tradition, extends far beyond the Judeo-Christian world. He is mentioned over 130 times in the Quran, more than any other prophet, which is proof of his immense importance in Islamic teachings. To start with, religious scholars said the secrecy surrounding Moses' burial was intentional, as they believed that the concealment of his final resting place was to prevent any form of idolatry or excessive veneration at his gravesite. But quite early in the quest for an answer, they encountered their first shock. Though the Quran's narrative of the event matches the biblical account, emphasizing Moses' mission to lead the Israelites and his role as a recipient of God's divine messages, it offered a starkly different perspective on the location of Moses' final resting place. And this on its own was a huge challenge. While a part of the texts narrated how Prophet Muhammad said he saw Moses praying over his grave near the red dunes of Rum in Jordan, another section of this same Quran claims Moses was buried closer to Jericho in the West Bank. And guess what? This was where one of the most revered sites associated with Moses within Islamic culture, which they called the Tomb of Nabi Musa in the West Bank, a center of pilgrimage and deep veneration for centuries, was situated. This, again, after the discovery of what seemed to be the Well of Miriam, was a very significant piece of evidence that brought us closer to understanding more about one of history's most significant figures and discovering his mysterious resting place. As renowned explorer Josh Gates wrapped up his expedition at the Sea of Galilee, he decided to visit this ancient and revered religious site, which, by now, had been paraded by the Islams as the purported final resting place of the biblical figure Moses. And boy, was he in for the surprise of the century. Eager to uncover the mysteries surrounding this hallowed ground, Gates set out on a journey deep into the rugged Palestinian territories. Eventually, he arrived at a remote and isolated compound nestled amidst the rolling, arid hills of the West Bank. This site, known as Nabi Musa, immediately captivated Gates' curiosity. As he stepped through the entryway, he was greeted by Professor Tafik Dadli, a local archaeologist who had dedicated much of his career to studying the complex history and religious significance of this enigmatic location. After the initial pleasantries, Gates wasted no time in making known the purpose of his visit. Stating how Moses had met his end on the opposite side of this valley, Mount Nebo, according to the biblical accounts, Gates wondered how this place had come to be associated with his burial. To clear his curiosity, Professor Dadli explained that the connection between Nabi Musa and the tomb of Moses dates back centuries. He stated that this site had been revered as the final resting place of the prophet Moses since at least the 4th century AD, when a church was built here to commemorate its sacred status. Dadli also pointed out that the site's name, Nabi Musa, which translates to Prophet Moses, was a clear indication of the deep-rooted religious traditions tied to this location. Intrigued, Gates probed further, inquiring if there was any tangible archaeological evidence to support these long-standing beliefs. In response, Dadli stated that the oldest physical marker they had was an inscription found near the entrance to the mausoleum, which was dated 1269 AD. It was with this that the founders established the site as the accepted burial place of Moses. But, Gates was not satisfied with this response, so he probed further. Noting that this date was still several centuries removed from the estimated lifetime of the biblical figure, he asked if they were talking about a tradition that emerged over 1,000 years after Moses himself. And to his amusement, Dadley nodded in acknowledgement and conceded that this was true. The professor explained that before the 13th century, written records became scarce, but the mausoleum was built based on the few records of that time that pointed to the existence of his grave in the area, which inadvertently means there is no concrete archaeological proof before the 13th century that proves he was buried there. Still, Josh was resolute to get all the answers he needed to get about this place, so he, probing further, asked whether the tomb had ever been opened or examined, but you won't believe what happened next. As soon as he did, Dadley's tone shifted, explaining that as an archaeologist, he was naturally driven to uncover the physical evidence and piece together the historical realities of sites like this. However, since the tomb was considered a sacred space by the Muslim community, they were wary of having it disturbed. So, while he would love to be able to look inside and study what lies within it, the reality was that they had never opened it, and likely never would. Which shows that in the end, some things just had to be left to the realm of belief and spiritual significance. This was a first, but despite the lack of tangible archaeological confirmation, Gates could see how this remote, evocative site had become a revered pilgrimage destination for followers of the Islamic faith, who continued to flock here from as far as Indonesia and India to honor what they believed to be the final resting place of the Prophet Moses. After this visit, Gates couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence at how a single site became the intersection between history, faith, and mystery in a very thought-provoking way. But without evidence of Moses in this tomb, should we still believe that Moses was truly buried there? Will we ever find his tomb? Could it truly be that he was taken directly to heaven, just like Prophet Elijah? Let's know your thoughts on this in the comments section. If you enjoyed this and would love to see the subsequent development on this, kindly subscribe, like, and share this video. Peace be unto you.